Perfect. Well, thank you, David. Hopefully you guys can all hear me. This is Michelle Altoff, your Vanpool Public Policy Vice Chair and SEACT Treasurer. Just want to say thank you guys for being on the call today. And Paul Straw and I put a lot of time trying to get some things set up for you guys. So normally we do our monthly SEACT chapter call at this time. And you guys asked for some Vanpool webinar training webinar information. So we've got 4 folks with you guys today, or 5 folks that are going to speak on behalf of just some updates going on, 1 in the Southeast, 2 with some exciting technology, and then about some funding sources and how to do relationship building. We did put this as a focus. We had set this up originally a couple months ago, pre-apocalypse now, I guess. And so, you know, I'm sure you guys have some questions about COVID-19, and I'm sure that will come up, but we really we're gearing this to some other types of conversations for you guys, and of course we can answer those questions too. The Vanpool Council itself had sent out an email a few weeks ago asking for people across the country to send us information on what you guys were doing so we could craft a response and send that out to folks. So I know we had done that a few weeks ago. I will check in with Desra on that and see if we need to resend that. But we've received a lot of good information. And so people were having questions or issues or what their agencies were doing with COVID, we're definitely here to help. So without further ado, I'm just going to take a quick minute or two and introduce these folks. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jacob from Leftango, who is also Vanpool Council land. So super excited to have him on board and engaged. And he's actually with co-chairing the work group directory now. So see what happens. You say yes, and then you get an official title. So he will be your first presenter. The second is Cheryl O'Connor, and she is our commute sales manager for enterprise, our public sector. So I do have a few bios, but I've abbreviated them. No offense, love y'all. But she's been in TDM for 12 years in the Vanpool segment for 7+. So I actually met her when she was with Arlington County with commuter services up there, and then transitioned over to VRIDE and then to enterprise now. She manages all the public sector contracts for commute, which is over 75 programs, which is crazy to me. She's super knowledgeable, not only in transportation policy, but funding, procurement, contracting, program structure, basically all the things. She has served on the National Board of Directors for ACT for 6 years. She's a fellow Leadership Academy class of 2009, and just super knowledgeable. So really happy to have her on today to talk to you guys. We have Ray Kafani, who is the research associate at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. She supports policy research under its economic mobility and workforce development portfolio. Most recently, Ray worked as a graduate research fellow with the Southern Economic Advancement Project, SEAP, producing a policy brief that studied the intersectionality of economic mobility and rural serving transportation programs. So we asked him to be on here today so he could talk more about specifically what's going on with rural transportation, talk about that policy brief that they were working on, the think tank. So I think it'll be super interesting to hear what they're working on. And then our last 2 speakers both work at North Bethesda Transportation Center. So Darlene Nader and Tracy McPhail. I have known them for a long time from my days back in DC, but Tracy, she began her TDM career as a transportation marketing coordinator for Baltimore City DOT. She rebranded their city's rideshare program and worked on CMAQ grants. She worked for Central Maryland Regional Transit, and now she is the marketing manager at North Bethesda Transportation Center. And she was a recipient of Act 40 Under 40 in 2016. Woo woo! Got the President's Award in the Chesapeake chapter in 2017 and 19, and she's the events chair. So Tracy is super knowledgeable. And then Darlene is the Assistant Executive Director at North Bethesda Transportation Center. So she works with employers to make sure that they are satisfying the requirements for their TDM plans, which requires all employers in the TMD area with 25 or more employees to have some sort of program in place, whether that be telework, transit benefit subsidy, transit subsidy, whatever that looks like. She does all the ride matching as well as reporting for Montgomery County, the state of Maryland, and Washcog. She's been involved with the Chesapeake chapter for over 20 years. She's had 2 positions on the board. She basically started the new members program a couple years ago, and we launched that in Baltimore. So that was really fun. And she received a President's Award back in 2018. So all these people, super, just give them their thanks for hopping on today, giving your time and your resources. So appreciate everybody.
Michelle, did you, I apologize. I think I was probably, I quickly just turned things over to you guys, but did you want me to give an update on ACT and ACT national activities?
Yes, if you can give an update from, I think that was the original part of the plan. You can give an update from the call with public policy yesterday, which was amazing. And then the CARE Act, that would be great.
Yep, no problem. And I'll probably sneak in a few other updates as well there. First off, you know, it's fabulous to see such a great crowd on the call today. It's strong evidence for, you know, the good work that the chapter is doing, and much thanks to all the chapter leaders for pulling this together. Definitely interesting times right now for, you know, the world, and you know, ACT is, you know, no different than anyone else out there in how we are having to adjust and respond to you know, the COVID outbreak. And just wanted to give some updates on where things stand. One, you know, everyone has seen our Emerging Mobility Summit at the end of April has been shifted to a online virtual event. I hope that everyone on the call will be able to register and attend for at least a portion, if not all, of that half-day virtual summit. We've got a really strong program that we've pulled together. The event is free for all ACT members, so I encourage you to take that opportunity to join us on that day. You know, we are, and I know many people are asking about it. We had an email that did go out this morning about the second keynote speaker that we have for the international conference. Right now, we are still planning to move forward with that event. It's the first week of August. It's about, you know, it's 4 months from now. Of course, we are monitoring the situation really closely. We have regular conversations with the hotel and are looking at, you know, how the outbreak is progressing and changing, you know, nationally as well as, you know, locally within the Denver region itself. And, you know, we'll be making any necessary decisions when it comes to, you know, that event, you know, as you know, based on, you know, the #1 interest of, you know, public health and safety. But we do encourage folks, you know, right now we are moving forward with it. We have removed all cancellation fees associated with that event. So, you know, if you're planning to attend, wanting to attend, I encourage you to register. There is no risk in, you know, if anything happens with that event, that you know, wouldn't be able to get any of those dollars back. But we do have some great keynote speakers we've announced. The program, I believe, is going to be going up, or maybe even up this week, or early next week. Today we announced Joseph Kopser as our second day keynote. He'll actually be speaking on some timely topics around managing through change and you know, transportation technology and you know, ensuring smooth operation. So a good topic for all of us. You know, yesterday, kind of shifting to the public policy front, we did have a really fabulous public policy briefing call that was open to the entire membership. We were joined by 2 congressmen. One was Chairman DeFazio, who was chair of the House T&I committee, who spent 15 minutes with us talking about transportation infrastructure, as well a response to the COVID-19 outbreak, and the progress towards transportation reauthorization in September. We were also joined by Representative Price out of North Carolina, a SEACT region representative there, who is also the subcommittee chair for the House Transportation, Housing, Urban Development Appropriations Subcommittee. We are, it was a great call with him as well. ACT has submitted language for the appropriations bill to help shape and influence federal policy around funding for TDM. So it was great to have him join us on yesterday's call and to recognize, our submission of that language. He was a great advocate for TDM, spoke about it knowledgeably, which is wonderful and rare within a member of Congress. So for those of you in North Carolina, you're lucky to have him, and I would encourage all ACT members in the chapter to reach out and build relationships with your members of Congress and their local offices. We also spent time talking about ACT's proposed More Through TDM Act. This is an important piece of legislation that we're trying to get introduced, and that would raise the profile of TDM and funding for TDM programs. So there is information on the ACT website that you can use to cut and paste an email communication to your member of Congress and ask for their support of that legislation. And I encourage everyone to take that opportunity. And then, just a couple other quick updates. As many of you know, we are launching a professional certification program for TDM. It's the TDM-CP exam. The initial public exam, the first one, was going to be scheduled in June, but due to the outbreak and scheduling conflicts that have arisen from other exams needing to shift, as well as the fact that no one's paying attention to trying to study for an exam right now, we have moved the exam dates to the end of September. We'll be announcing more information about that and how you can start to study and register for that exam, in the coming weeks. But there is a handbook up on the website that you can access through and see the list of resources that are recommended to study. And then next week, we will actually be announcing the hiring of a new employee for ACT, an individual that will be serving in the role as a membership experience manager, which is an exciting new position for the organization. And this is someone who is going to take on working directly with chapter and council leaders and the broader membership and looking at ways that we can expand the value and provide more services directly to all of you. So we'll be making that announcement on Monday and look forward to making that public. In regards to the overall coronavirus situation, regarding stimulus, there was money in that bill, $25 billion for transit agencies. There is still, I would say, confusion, but uncertainty about how exactly those dollars can be used for in relation to TDM. Vanpooling is one where we believe there is a real opportunity for Vanpool programs. To some of the resources that I'm sure Cheryl and Michelle will be able to talk more to that. But in addition, I encourage all of you to reach out to your transit agencies and talk about how you can provide assistance to them in helping communicate and promote the importance of public transit, as well as the broader transportation options as we start to head out of this current lockdown that we're in. At some point we will all be shifting back to work, And there will be a very important role for the TDM industry to play to educate employers and employees about the options they have and to make sure that people remain safe and utilizing them all. So I encourage you to look into those opportunities. As we move forward, there most likely will be a fourth and possibly fifth and more stimulus packages. ACT has put together a list of requests that we are seeking support for in those bills. Things around increasing the qualified transportation fringe benefit, expanding the benefit to serve things like carpools and reinstating the bicycle benefit, along with resources to help general marketing and promotion as we get back into commuting to work. So I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm happy to take any questions if folks have some right now. All righty, I'll turn it back over to you, Michelle.
All right, so thanks, David. I think that's super interactive. I was able to be on the call yesterday and listen to both chairmen speak, and the fact that y'all were able to get that type of leadership from DC. For the people who weren't able to be on that public policy call yesterday, it was really interesting because it's kind of cool to hear, yeah, I was just on a phone call with the White House and the task force for coronavirus. Like, who gets to say things like that? So I just thought that was really interesting. But y'all are not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to everybody else. So I'm going to turn it over to Jacob. I think you're up, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, David. Everyone hear me okay? You can hear me okay, Michelle?
Yes.
Absolutely, great. It's now if the slides will move, we've really won.
I definitely am not in charge of that, so.
There we go. I think it's working. So look, thanks Michelle and Paul for the opportunity to speak to you all. Just to give you a little bit of a quick introduction to Lift Tango first, and then really what I wanted to introduce to you all today is probably the start of an idea. And it sort of reflects us coming from Australia originally and now into the US market and being so impressed by the Vanpool model, and then starting to explore how we could support it and some ideas around how technology may increase the use of and value of such a terrific service. So Lift Tango, we started about 4 years ago in Australia with some funding from a group called the NRMA, which is sort of the equivalent of the DMV here. Our first product was a dynamic carpool product for large organizations. We started with universities and then we moved into corporate clients and business parks, offering a fully dynamic carpooling option, allowing those people to share their ride and trying to get the dreaded single occupancy vehicles off the road. About 3 years ago, we pivoted our technology into the on-demand transport or microtransit space. This was sort of at the behest of Transport for New South Wales, who are the transit agency that look after the state of New South Wales in Australia, which Sydney is the major city within that. They ran a massive pilot of everything they could think of in terms of public transport ideas, from autonomous vehicles to electric all the way through. And they asked us to apply our technology to on-demand transport. And so from then, we've also been in that space. And we set up shop in the US about just close to a year ago. David and the whole ACT team have welcomed us very well. We've been to a few conferences and started to meet some people and traveling around the country in terms of sort of, understanding the market here. So we're still learning, and we appreciate what a welcoming and well-organized committee and community it's been. So we have, I guess, 4 major parts to our product. Sorry, these slides there's a little bit of a delay, I think. So as we said, we've got the on-demand technology that we offer. And also our carpooling service. We do all the sort of simulation and feasibility studies as well. And then we've started to move into Vanpool. So it wants me to go to this slide, so I'll do it. So I guess what struck us when we first arrived, Vanpool is not something that exists in Australia. It's the model that you have in the US. It seems to be unique to the US. We've been speaking to people in Canada and they're looking to replicate it. And we were just struck by what a fantastic idea it is. The funding seems to be, quite sustainable and provides value to all involved, which is a huge challenge in transport. It's pretty easy to start. You've got incredibly well organized vendors. The capital required is relatively minimal compared to other options. And it's, all the studies show it's by far and away, one of the cheapest options for commuters. So it saves a lot of money. I think it's twice as cheap as even carpooling, which is something we've been advocating for a long time. So when we looked at it, we thought, why isn't everybody doing this? Why isn't it more popular? It's statistically less popular than carpool, yet it's far cheaper and more efficient. So we've started a journey of trying to understand this, and I think we would love to speak to more organisations in Vanpools. We've really only started that conversation with some organisations in the Bay Area, and I just wanted to share with the group some initial findings and ideas, which I think, with the incredible experience and brains in this group, it may stimulate some further discussion. So what did we find? So we went out and asked. We spoke to about 8 organisations in the Bay Area, and then when we sort of asked, what are the, sorry, I'm not sure why these are moving on me.
Jacob, I can take back control.
Yeah, it's just started to move on me for some reason. Apologies, everyone. We could just go back to, just after this one. Yeah, just the next slide. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. So I think just to share a summary of some of the discussions that we had. So we sort of asked, it's moving on us, isn't it, Casey? We can just go back to the slide before.
Let me see.
And y'all, this is what every single one of our employers and clients have every day, right? With teleworking, trying to figure out and navigate.
Oh, there's
I think
if you just go, sorry everyone, I think if you go to transitions, there seems to be some animations in this that we can, I'm not sure how they got there, but
there we go.
There we go. And on the next slide as well. So I can see if you just, sorry, the joys. At least, the cat hasn't run in yet. So,
I mean, I could take myself off video. Well, you don't want me to do that.
Okay.
But I do have a coworker sitting right next to me, and he's very cuddly, and he is listening.
Very good. All right, we'll get back to it. Thanks for your patience, everyone. So as we said, we were sort of trying to understand, what else? How can we get more people into this? So I think if we just go back one slide, Casey. There we go. So look, is it still moving?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Maybe we'll do it like this. And I'll talk quickly. So I guess from a commuter perspective, one of the big questions we asked was, look, have you ever been part of, or have you considered joining a Vanpool? And we spoke to about close to 100 people in the Bay Area. And the response rate was not many had really considered it. We sort of followed that up with, why not? What stopped you? And what we really found was there was a knowledge gap, which I'm sure you've all felt. So many didn't know what it was. They didn't think that their company offered it. They thought you had to own a van, or that you had to be a registered driver or a sort of qualified to do it. And then the sort of last reason that came up was that they thought it was just for sort of people who lived a long way from the office. It was just a sort of a case-by-case thing and probably didn't apply to me. So it made us realize there was a little bit of a knowledge gap, which points to an opportunity. And Casey, if you just pop to the next slide. So when we then provided those same people with some information around how Vanpool works, and what are the features and how you could join, suddenly that number jumped from 5% to 30% roughly of people that would, okay, wow, now that I know what it is, I would consider joining a Vanpool. That sounds pretty good. Again, we asked why not to those that still weren't sort of convinced. And for many of them, the general theme that came out was that they felt it was too rigid and static in the way that it worked. They were worried they wouldn't be able to meet the commitment because, you know, their work hours differ, and sometimes they go in on a Wednesday and sometimes they don't have to, and sometimes they have to go early to pick up the kids, and, you know, all those things that are, you know, the current situation, well, not the current, but you know, the general situation for workers these days. So, you know, all of that sort of led to, we think there's, you know, there's some opportunities to look at how we can make this Vanpool programs and this service more flexible and kind of work for the modern day worker that has a very varied schedule. So if we just pop to the next slide, Casey. Thank you. We also looked at, you know, for those who are, you know, kind of in the core of organising and running Vanpools, the drivers and the administrators, we asked them about it too. And, you know, what are some of the big challenges that you're having? So the big one that came out for Vanpool drivers was dealing with cancellations, trying to find backup drivers. You know, many of them have phone lists and they ring into the organisation, but it's quite difficult. They struggle with reporting and payments. I know, speaking to some Vanpool organisers, you've put incentives and everything to try and help people to get their reporting the way it should be. And then the basics of communicating in the group, you know, how they do that. Some people using, you know, messenger groups and WhatsApp and what else, but it's all quite manual the way they had to do it. And then, you know, coming last as well was, and this varied, I guess it's a bit of a Bay Area problem as well, was parking at either end for the vans. And then for the organisers and the admin, I looked at both the discussions that we had, but also looked at some of the historic surveying that's been done by the Vanpool Council, Michelle, which I just, you know, got recently, and summarised some of the pain points. And most of the comments spoke to the biggest pain points as kind of growing participation, then matching potential Vanpoolers, so trying to, through the sea of people that could be interested, trying to put those people together, maintaining Vanpool participation, so once they're set up, keeping them going and filling the seats, and also dealing with, you know, reporting and payment issues, getting people to report on time, accurately, completely, and all the things. So that tended to be the sort of challenges that the group, you know, behind the riders is facing. Casey, if we just pop to the next one. Got it working now. So we then went, okay, so we think, you know, we know on-demand technology and what it tends to solve and the new features that it can offer. And we looked at, okay, so let's imagine a world where on-demand technology was applied to Vanpool. So the current sort of Vanpool tips, and we took this from some of the best commuter benefits and TDM organisations online, and I've kind of summarised some of the tips that they give. So, you know, currently it's select central, easily accessible meeting points, and, you know, create a regular and reliable schedule so that, you know, it's easy to pick up people and all of that goes smoothly on the way in and the way out from work. I wanted you to imagine that then with on-demand technology, where you can book trips and have your location live on GPS and have drivers and riders, you know, automatically routed to each other by a system so that all of the different travel aspects and speed and time and schedule is all included. Suddenly that could become far more flexible and far more efficient and easy to run. The second point here around making sure all Vanpool participants have a roster listing and contact information in case there's an issue. Again, through the power of technology, if everyone was connected by an on-demand app, suddenly you could have flexible riders, people who can ride on a Monday and a Wednesday and a Friday, and that's very easy to administer. And you've got backup riders and people to fill seats very easily and automatically if seats become available. You could have riders booking their ride requests and being matched dynamically with Vanpools, no more having to find them manually. Real-time tracking of Vanpools, so seeing them live on a map, fully integrated with navigation tools, so it's very easy for the drivers and the riders to find each other. And it also opens up the possibility of in-app communications and really using technology that people are starting to love. It seems everyone loves to do everything from their phone, so there's an opportunity here. It won't work for everyone, but there could be something in this. Another piece was around the emergency ride home. Again, that's in place for most people, but it's a challenge administratively to run. Power technology, again, you can automate all of that, and you also may avoid the need for using other things other than Vanpools, because suddenly any Vanpools that service your organization, you can access that capacity and see whether or not, you know, another Vanpool may be able to help that person or those group of people that have been stranded. And then really the last one, you know, provide a simple system for capturing data and reporting. The way an on-demand system works is that all of the trips are logged, and all of the payments can be managed through the app as well, and then directly fed into the various reporting systems that are in place, whether that's, you know, the sorts of things that Commute with Enterprise offer, or other things that our organisations are using. So it may take away the need for self-reporting, which seems to be a bit of a burden for everybody. Casey, we just pop to the next slide. So this is just a little bit of a, you know, this is a start of an idea. Like anything with technology, it all seems great in theory, but the reality is when you get into it. And I guess that's what we'd love to explore with this group. But here's a sort of a thought on how it could work and what the technology could allow. Instead of each of your Vanpools that service your organisation, or even a set of collective organisations within your city, operating kind of as one unit, you open up the possibility of them operating as a network, a cluster of Vanpools. And you can then create, you know, service zones for those to operate in. Each bus or each van can have its own kind of zone of service that can be set by the driver or the administrator of that van. And then once riders could, you know, register for the system, become approved to be part of this network, and then have access, in theory, to that cluster of capacity. So suddenly, instead of having, you know, 10, 15 individual Vanpools, you have a fleet. And the technology allows you to play with the flexibility of that fleet, whether you allow same-day bookings or you set booking windows where, you know, you only accept bookings for the next day. You can have people booking, you know, monthly cycles, all those different things that the technology allows. So look, this is, you know, just a snippet start of an idea. We have not spoken to enough people across the country to say this would work for everybody, but we think this may benefit what is already, I think, a terrific initiative, and something that we'd really like to help to penetrate further and to give more value to more commuters. So just wanted to share that with you. If anyone is open to you know, having some surveys and some focus groups with your Vanpools, obviously under the current circumstances, that might not be something you're looking at right now. But as we start to return to normal, we would love to connect with you all. And some of the feedback we're getting from organisations is that as we start to return to normal and they start bringing people back to work, controllable shared mobility, you know, is presenting itself as the next best option, I guess, or the next safest option to people driving on their own. And everyone on this call wouldn't want us to, you know, go backwards in suddenly driving on our own becomes the weapon of choice yet again. But, you know, these controllable shared networks seem to be the things that may be the next best option before people gain confidence again in public transport and those sort of more mass transit options. So again, thank you everyone for your time. Yeah, happy to connect with all of you, and I'll hand back over to the team.
Thanks, Jacob. Super interesting. So see how things develop over the next few months. So appreciate you just showing the technology and the future, hopefully, right?
Yeah, let's hope so.
So next, I believe we have Cheryl O'Connor.
Hi guys, how's it going? Okay. So I'm guessing you guys are just gonna run the show, right, in terms of hitting the clicker button?
We can give it to you if you'd like, Cheryl.
Either way, you can just say next slide or whatever works if the transitions aren't impeding progress.
Yeah,
Amanda, why don't you keep
Yeah.
control, and then that way if we have to tweak, we tweak.
Cool.
Perfect.
Works for me. So hi guys, I was just spinning through the attendee list, lots of familiar names and I would say faces if we were all on video, but nice to talk to you guys again. Nice to be getting back involved with ACT. I took a step back a little bit for a couple of years. I was getting my master's and little thing called acquisition happened. And so it feels good. It feels like I'm coming back home to family, getting back involved again. So good to see you all today. Speaking of seeing, I am not going to turn on my video because I've been working very long hours supporting our Vanpools across the country, making sure that we're taking folks on a case-by-case basis, making sure that we can still get those essential workers to their job sites. Also working with our government affairs team. We were very involved in getting the CARES Act passed. So I've been working long days and nobody needs to see these dark circles under my eyes. So that's my picture on my cover screen there, or on my cover slide. And so we'll get right into it. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Vanpool funding. You know, I tend to get into the lane of contracted Vanpool programs because that's what we know, that's what I know, that's what we deal with on a daily basis. As Michelle said, I help to oversee 75 existing public sector contracts around the United States. I also, my main hat that I wear is creating new Vanpool programs or expanding some of those existing programs across the United States and then into Canada as well. So, so if I start to get too wonky or too down the contracted Vanpool route, just, you know, somebody let me know and I'll rein it back in. But so we're going to spin through a little bit of, you know, just to give you an agenda, we're going to spin through a little bit of the hierarchy, right? How does funding really flow into Vanpool programs, whether it's a contracted program or an in-house program? Then we're going to dive into a little bit of you know, what those actual funding sources are. So lucky for me, being in the position I am in and my career path in TDM, I've been able to see the funding sources from both a private side as well as a public side. And then because our public sector contracts vary so widely across the United States, I've had the opportunity to work with a bunch of different organizations, right? Those contracts might be with, you know, the state DOT, they might be with the local metropolitan planning organization, the COG, the actual transit agency, a city or county that just has a transit division in there. And so because those relationships vary so much and those entities are eligible for different funding options, I've been able to see a very wide range of funding options for these programs. So, so I'm going to spin through a couple of those and then I'm happy to take any questions later. I try not to get wonky, but sometimes I do. Those on the call who know me know I'm a transportation geek and can ramble on for hours about it. Jacob, I'd actually love to pick your brain and get into a philosophical question about vanpooling and why it's not so much more widely used in the US and around the world. Okay, so let's talk about this hierarchy, right? How does this really work? And I know there's varying levels of knowledge on the call. So if you know this, just bear with us for a little while. I want to make sure that everybody has a base level of how these funds really flow in the United States. So at the very top, of course, we have the DOT, and Vanpool is dictated, well, the federal funding anyway is dictated by the FAST Act, right? So we're just a very small piece of that overarching legislation that talks about all sorts of surface transportation. And so then under the DOT, if you guys will click the next two. So under the DOT, we work with two main agencies, right? So the Federal Transit Administration, the Federal Highway Administration. I've added some examples of the funding sources that are used for vanpooling under both of those administrations on the screen. And so you know, a little word of advice, you know, as you're looking at, okay, how do I go about funding my Vanpool program? Or, you know, my one funding source is running out, so I need to look for another. When you're diving through the funding pages under FTA or FHWA, there's a good advice to have in that FTA tends to deal in numbers. So you'll see 5307 if you're in an urban area, 5311 if you're a rural area. Conversely, on the highway side of things, you'll see them operate in letters, you know, SEACT, National Highway Performance Program, STP, you know, things like that. So that's not a rule for everything. There are some caveats to that, but it's a good rule of thumb to use as you're sifting through all of these options for vanpooling. So regardless of which administration you're getting your money from, that money then flows down to the local entity. That local entity then has the opportunity to either run the Vanpool program themselves or contract it out. I've put an example on this slide of how local entities contract out their program. So I put a $500 per van per month subsidy on here just to let everybody on the call know. That $500 wasn't just pulled out of thin air. If you average out all of our subsidies with our public sector sponsors across the United States, it comes out to about $500 because they range anywhere from $200 on the low end up to $1,200 per van per month on the high end. So $500 is a good average. So that local entity, and that local entity could be a whole host of folks, right? That could be the DOT. Right? Maybe Federal Highway is giving CMAQ money to the Michigan Department of Transportation, and then the Michigan Department of Transportation contracts with us. Whoa. Did the presentation just...
I'm not sure what just happened there. I think I got kicked out. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. Don't worry.
All right, let me see.
Cheryl, you can wing it. Come on.
Yeah, I totally can. Yeah, I'll keep talking until the slide comes back
All
up.
right, let me get it back. Sorry about that, everyone.
No worries, no worries.
All right.
Oh, there we go. That works. So that local entity, again, could be any one of those entities that I listed out before, and they could be running the Vanpool program themselves, or they could contract out to a Vanpool vendor, such as Commute with Enterprise. Or that local entity, instead of using federal dollars, you can use local funds. And we'll get into some of those examples of folks using local funds to fund their Vanpool program, whether they're an in-house or contracted. So in a contracted scenario, that money then flows down to, for example, Commute with Enterprise, but whatever Vanpool vendor you happen to be working with. And excuse me, it flows down to that local operator, typically through a contract. There's only a few instances around the country where there isn't a contract in place, but the feds require that if you're using federal money. So that money flows down to that contractor. Next click. And that it flows directly through that contractor down to your Vanpool groups. Now your Vanpool operator should not be quote unquote keeping any of that money. It should directly buy down the cost of the monthly Vanpool rate to those Vanpool groups. So, you know, if the Vanpool cost, $1,500 a month and you're providing that $500 subsidy, you want to be rest assured that your Vanpool groups are then only paying $1,000, right? Pretty easy math there. But that operator works with those Vanpool groups, does all your employer outreach or works alongside you as the agency, gets folks into Vanpools, and then collects all of that monthly National Transit Database information. And so we help that public agency somehow get that information back up into NTD. So next click. And the final one. And so that information helps to go right back up to the top, right? To help the feds determine how much funding is gonna flow back through this system. So I do wanna give a caveat here. And I can't, oh, there's my cursor. Can you guys see my cursor? Maybe, no?
No.
Oh, Okay. Well, anyway, I want to give a caveat here. So when that money goes back up to the DOT, it's actually funneling down to the Federal Transit Administration. So on the Federal Transit Administration side of things, all of those funding sources, that 5307, that 5311, it's all formula based. And those formulas, the data that goes into that formula to determine how much funding that local entity is going to get, is based on the performance that was reported in a previous year, right? So conversely, on the federal highway side of things, federal highway is all about grants, right? So if you're applying, CMAQ is the biggest one and the most we hear about. If you're applying for a CMAQ grant, it's a grant for 3 or 5 years, it's a set amount of money, and then it's gone, right? And then you sort of hope and pray that CMAQ is still around in 3 to 5 years and that you can apply for another grant. Where on the Federal Transit Administration side of things, once you start funneling that Vanpool information or your bus or your demand response or commuter bus or what have you back up into the DOT, that helps you create a very sustainable funding source, because that performance data is going to go right into those formulas and help you generate formula funding or FTA money in the future. And so I want to make that distinction between the two. We see a lot across the country, a lot of programs, they might start with CMAQ or NHPP or maybe a local funding source. And so in the meantime, they're reporting that data while they have that limited funding source. And then once those formula funds start to flow back into the system, they then start to move over to using 5307 or 5311 or what have you. It really depends on the agency. It really depends on their funding availability and how they want to go about things and run their program. Like I said, every program is different, but we are seeing quite a few programs start out that way. Okay, so next slide. I hope that makes sense to everybody. So let's get into some of these actual funding sources. So this is a slide that for those folks who work with us, who we contract with, or those folks who we're talking to about starting a program, you've seen this slide. I use it in all of my conversations. It just talks about what is really out there. How do we fund these Vanpool programs? And so again, under that FTA, and I'm talking about this top left-hand box here, under FTA, we've seen 5307 used both in our urban and large urban areas, as well as in that small urban arena. Those small urban areas that have a population between 50,000 and 200,000 are eligible for what's called small transit intensive cities funding. And some of our folks do use that to fund their Vanpool program. We then have 5311, 5340, and I'm going to go in depth into these funding structures in a little bit here. But 5340 is only for about 7 states across the United States, and they're all in the Northeast. But we'll go into that. And then, build grants under FTA are an option for Vanpool programs. Now, if you know anything about build grants, if you're a rural area, it has to be $1 million or more. If the project has to be $1 million or more. If you're in an urban area, it has to be $5 million or more. But what better way to help mitigate any issues that come along with construction projects, for instance, than funding a Vanpool program or other TDM options, right? And so while you wouldn't go after a build grant just for Vanpool, it can definitely be part of your overall project proposal under that funding source. So then we have FHWA, and again, I'll go into these a little bit more in detail here in a minute, so I'm just going to spin through the rest of these rather quickly. Under the federal guidelines, if you have a contracted Vanpool program, we comply with the capital cost of contracting policy. That basically just sets up the ability to contract out your Vanpool program, and then says, hey, look, the feds can't pay for more than 50% of this program. You gotta figure out some other way or utilize that private capital that private contractor is bringing to the table for any other funding that you need. And then lastly, on the federal side of things, the Private Investment and Commuter Vanpooling Act, you know, some of the, let's call them forefathers of vanpooling for a very loving term. This was a piece of legislation that was not passed on its own, but it was incorporated into MAP 21 and the FAST Act. And what it says is that, you know, as the feds, we realize that if you're contracting out your program, that private contractor is bringing capital to the table. And you can utilize that contractor's private capital as that 20% local match if you're using, you know, like FTA dollars or something like that. That's a little bit confusing. I'm happy to explain that to anybody on the call in more detail offline if you want to talk about that. And then some outside the box thinking, right? What are some of those local funds that we see being used around the United States? And this is the bottom box here on the left-hand side. Quite a few of our programs were started with economic development funds. You know, since we're talking to SEACT, the Florida DOT rural program that was started with economic development funds, very sustainable and growing program. They have since moved over to commuter assistance money down in Florida, but that's a great way. What better way to increase the economic vitality of your area than pumping some economic development funds into a Vanpool program to allow folks to get to work. So seems pretty straightforward, but you know, oftentimes, especially in transportation world, we get these blinders on, and I think even more so in TDM, right? We get these blinders on. You know, we're so focused on maybe one or two funding options that you know, it's kind of hard to see what those other options are. So we also, there is in New York, there's this grant opportunity called AEI. It was set up as a response to the mortgage crisis of 2008 and 2009. They're starting to utilize some of that money to get some programs going in upstate New York. Community development and block grants, and then of course local funding. Obviously, setting up a tax district is a very long-term solution, but we do see that in areas like Texas and Michigan and some other areas around the United States where they have maybe that 1% or transportation tax that they're utilizing to start or expand their Vanpool program. So, and then of course we also want to make sure that the employer is involved in that, right? And we all know about the employer benefit. I don't necessarily think I need to go through that with all of you. So next slide, please. And how am I doing on time, Michelle?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Whoa. Okay. So against everything that I stand for in marketing and sales, I put a bunch of words on this slide, but I want to make sure that you guys have the information. So these are all of the funding structures that were on that previous slide that are coming from Federal Highway. Again, remember that Federal Highway tends to work in letters, right? So we have congestion mitigation and air quality. I don't think I need to explain that to anybody on this call because a ton of our TDM programs around the country are funded with CMAQ. I will give, we are finding that some folks are worried about their CMAQ funding here coming up pretty soon in the next few years because it's actually sort of working. We are improving the air quality in a bunch of these non-attainment areas. So, you know, if you're using that, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about what your other options might be. Then we have the Surface Transportation and Block Grant Program, STBG or STP. It goes under a couple different forms, and depending on what sort of entity you're coming from, you know, is going to determine your acronym too. So STP is a very all-encompassing program. You can fund highways, you can fund construction, you can do transit, Vanpool, you know, put in a bike path, put it, you know, all sorts of stuff. And so think of that as the real umbrella funding source from Federal Highway. And then we also have the National Highway Performance Program. What better way to improve the performance of highways than to move people from single occupancy vehicles into high occupancy vehicles? And so we're starting to see that being used around the country. Supposedly a new program that's going to go live here in the next year or so in South Carolina is using the National Highway Performance Program funding source. So next slide. I created some clip notes for you guys. Federal Highway, these are the three main structures that we see coming out of Federal Highway, and some clip notes again about what they do and what they stand for. Next slide. Okay, so moving back under to FTA, Federal Transit Administration. So we have those 5307 funds for our urban areas. We have STIC funding, the small transit intensive cities under 5307. So you'll see out to the right here, the population levels. So the FTA puts every transit or transportation entity into a bucket. And that bucket is based on what your population is in your urbanized area. And so you'll see off to the right here, some of the population centers or population levels that each of these funding sources apply to. And so STIC funding, it's a little confusing, but basically if you're a small area, but you have transit performance that rivals your larger sister cities, then you get an extra pot of money. I mean, that's the simplest way for me to put it. We have our 5311 for our rural areas. We've got our 5340 for our growing or high density states. You can see the 7 states in that description. And so they're all in the Northeast. So unfortunately, if you're in any other part of the country, you're not eligible for this funding. But you know, for those that are on the call, you might want to look into working with your transit agencies or looking into this funding source. And then there's some umbrella legislation that's, you know, this is a further explanation of capital cost of contracting and the Private Investment in Commuter Vanpooling Act. Feel free to read it at your leisure and maybe have some good sleeping material. But I wanted to make sure you guys had that information. Next slide. I know I'm over my 3 minutes now. I apologize. I think I have just 2 more slides. Is it?
Are you able to push it through?
Oh, I think we're frozen. So my next, here, I'll just verbally tell you guys because you'll get these slides anyway. So my next slide is really just a cliff notes of, you know, what happened, or I'm sorry, the funding sources under FTA. Some cliff notes on there and the populations levels that they apply to. My last 2 slides in the presentation deal with, okay, we've got this program set up. What does it really mean to report that data and the formula that, or return that you get based on that formula? And so there's a chart on slide 9. Go to, yep. So this looks very complicated, and transportation funding is that. I mean, you know, I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm sure you guys know that, but you know, I wanted to highlight out for you guys based on the population level that you may or may not be in, what formulas Vanpooling actually affects for you guys. So everything that's highlighted in yellow is a data unit value or data unit factor that is affected by Vanpool. So if you're reporting your Vanpool data, these are some of the returns that you're going to get on that. So let's say that you're in an area that has over 1 million in population. So every revenue mile that you report for Vanpooling, just how far that van is going, it doesn't matter how many people are in the van, right? We have a 40-mile commute. A 40-mile commute, that's going to get you, I can't do that math, 40 times 43 cents. It's going to get you $17 as the public direct recipient of FTA money. And so, you know, that's the simplest form. And then when you get down into passenger miles is a little bit more complicated. They take all of the passenger miles for your buses, your Vanpools, your demand response, and they combine them together, multiply it by themselves, and divide it by your operating expenses. And then multiply it by this data unit factor of 1 cent. And so, you know, 1 cent doesn't seem like a lot, but, you know, once you start looking at those passenger mile levels, with all of those combined services, it ends up being quite a bit of money. So I will close it out now. I apologize, I went over time. You guys that know me know I can chat for a long time, so sorry for that. But I am happy to talk to anybody who's on the call offline about, what Vanpooling would really mean for your area, regardless of whether you end up contracting with Commute with Enterprise or not. We want to make sure that we're getting more vans on the road. We're increasing the knowledge of this industry. To Jacob's point, I don't know who he was talking to in the Bay Area, but making sure that folks know that this is an option. So happy to talk to you guys. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and thank you for the invitation today.
Thanks, Cheryl. That's a lot of good information. So I know we're running a little bit short, and we want to give some time for Q&A, but we've still got Jacob and, we still got Ray and Tracy and Darlene, so we're a little fast.
Oh, Ray, you're on mute.
Are you able to unmute him at all, Amanda?
Ray. Oh, it looks like you're back. Here, let me see.
Bottom left-hand side, Ray.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
Yep, there we are.
Okay. Somehow it went, the whole screen went out.
hi.
It took me to another screen. I couldn't even control anything for a second. Sorry about that.
No worries. You
But
should
yes,
have control
and
now
try
if you want to do that, or
as far as controlling the slides.
yeah, do you want me to still go with it, or would you like to click through?
It may be best if you control it. You have more familiarity with it than I do.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, just to try to keep track of time, I'll go ahead and go in. Once again, my name is Ray Califani. I'm a research associate with the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. I was a recent graduate research fellow with the Southern Economic Advancement Project, so I definitely want to plug them before I go into anything else. Just to give just a brief background on them. So, Southern Economic Advancement Project, affectionately known as SEACT, that's how we pronounce their acronym. They amplify the efforts of existing organizations and networks that work towards broadening economic power and building a more equitable future. And in exploring policy ideas that broaden economic power, that places a lens or brings attention to how race, class, and gender, how they intersect with social and economic policy in the South. SEACT focuses on 12 states within the Southern region, and particularly on focusing on marginalized and vulnerable populations in the South, and they're a fiscally sponsored project of the Roosevelt Institute. So with that being said, and giving SEACT their shout out, I'll go into the slides that I have. I can't see, okay, I can see it, okay. So across within 2019, all throughout 2019, SEACT did a number of listening sessions across the South with nonprofits and other advocacy groups that were the conversation that kept coming up, the issue that kept coming up in these listening sessions was how transportation, was a missing piece to, to economic mobility. People can't get to jobs, people can't participate, civically if they don't have a means to get there, if they don't have a means to vote. It's the bridge for so many things for people to have a healthy life. And from that, that let us know, why rural transportation programs matter. Because, in this policy report that we did, the research that we did, we wanted to focus on this intersectionality between economic mobility and transportation amongst transportation programs in the rural South. And, why does it matter? Rural transportation programs provide greater access to quality housing, healthcare, jobs, education, childcare, and social networks. They help families get jobs and keep jobs, which ultimately can help them to get higher wages and make healthier financial decisions, be able to raise their families easier. And then without these without the existing rural transportation modes that are there, and it's certainly not enough of them, particularly in the rural South. You know, people have to rely on transportation programs that really don't serve their needs effectively, and with that, that can ultimately stifle potential rural economic development. Go on to the next slide. Are you able to? There we go. So we looked at we interviewed program administrators across two basic types of programs. We talk about transit programs that include Vanpool programs and other type of transit programs, and then low-income car ownership programs, which amongst a number of policymakers and policy researchers, policy wonks, these two type of programs could have competing interests. You want to take more cars off the road by having transit programs, but we think that while they may have somewhat different different interests or different methods, they can have, if they are able to complement each other, they can have similar transformational impacts. And also they may serve different constituencies, as low-income car ownership programs, those who typically qualify, they are in the higher bracket of those who are lower, moderate, low income. Those are the ones that typically qualify for these low-income car ownership programs, or at least one part of them. And with transit programs, they can be they more so can be tailored to those on the lower ends of the poverty scale. I'll go to the next slide. So as I said, we interviewed program administrators across low-income car ownership programs, and we interviewed program administrators across Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky, Mississippi, Texas. I won't name all the rest, but you see it there. Rural transit programs and Vanpool programs. And in our methodology, as far as our interview protocol, we ask questions to get insight on the program model description, the administrative service trends and challenges, their policy concerns, their expansion projections, funding flexibility, and the implications of any technological advances that they may see coming down the pipe. And we can go to the next. So as far as the low-income car ownership programs, these are four of the programs that we interviewed, which provide low interest rate car loans to eligible families. And as far as the eligibility standards, they're typically between at a bottom of 200% of the poverty level. Some could go up to 250, maybe 300% of the federal poverty level. They look for stable employment, demonstrated stability, but along with that, they do what they call character-based lending. They want to get a full picture. They want to get a deeper story of the people that they're looking to help. Because these people that come to them, they're referred to them by social service agencies. A number of different ones that bring them to organizations like Jumpstart, On the Road Lending, Northwest Cap, and Goodwill, Kentucky. These are different low-income car ownership, low and moderate income car ownership programs that want to get this deeper feel for who they're looking to provide a low-interest car loan to. And these organizations, they have the mission of combating predatory auto lending, which there's this vicious cycle within rural communities in the South where they are delinquent on these loans. They lose the cars that they get from these predatory auto lenders, and they're just in a deeper financial hole than what they already were in. And now what are they left with when it comes to finding transportation options? To get the jobs that aren't often in the rural communities, they have to go out to the suburban communities. So service areas of each one. Jumpstart, this is a transportation program that serves 7 counties within Wisconsin. On the Road Lending, they began in Dallas, Texas, and then they've expanded to Mississippi, Alabama, and now Georgia. Northwest Cap serves 5 counties in New Jersey, and Goodwill Cars to Work program in Kentucky. They serve, almost all of Kentucky and southern Indiana. And just another thing to point out with these programs is that, well, I'll come back to that, but, they often provide, they provide around, most of them provide about an average of a $500 down payment to those who qualify. They provide financial education and literacy across the life of the loan. Most of these loans they provide, where they're providing, used to late model vehicles, are between interest rates of 5% and 9.75%, compared to predatory auto lenders who could be offering interest rates that are above 30%. I know that, those who are listening, a 9.75% interest rate, yeah, that is fairly high. These are, second tier interest rates. But, for those who mostly have options where they can only go to predatory car lenders, 9.75 or a range between 5 and 9.75 is a lot better than 30, 31, 32%. I'll go to the next slide. And then these are other programs that provide car donations, or they sell cars at a very, very minimum cost to eligible TANF recipients. And one is Good News Mountaineer Garage, which is in West Virginia. They also have another setup that's in, I believe it's in Massachusetts. Goodwill Wheels to Work operates in Michigan and serves central Michigan and Battle Creek area of Michigan. And on these programs that we looked at, they either serve complete rural areas, a combination of urban and rural areas, or statewide. And as I said, the program benefits of Good News Mountaineer Garage. They provide low cost, roadworthy vehicles for almost free of charge. Just as and Goodwill Wheels to Work in Michigan, they do the same. I'll go to the next slide. And then going into the transit and Vanpool programs that we interviewed, Walterboro Works. They are in what's known as Low Country, South Carolina. Their service area, the city of Walterboro, South Carolina, and they provide fixed route transit for target economic distressed communities within Walterboro to get them to the industries that are there. There's the beauty of this program, which hopefully can be scaled to other areas, other rural areas, is that there's this combination of job centers, job training centers, a reliable transit provider, ridership that can use this, and ridership that can extend not just from low income communities that are there, but also this general ridership that can provide lasting sustainability to this transit program. And then Tupelo Transit, who operates in Tupelo, Mississippi. The planning for this project, began as this partnership between industries that are already there, and being able to transport the workers that are in those industries, that are in the areas within those industries or around those industries there. But as it evolved, it became a demand response transit program that provides a more robust network throughout the major corridors of Tupelo. And then going into Vanpool programs, so we interviewed the Coast Transit Authority, which operates or which serves areas in Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, and Mississippi. They provide, 13 of the Vanpools that they have originate in rural areas and accommodate all work shifts, which is a major thing for these low-income groups or economic distress areas who often work in the industries that have varying work shifts. And then FDOT Enterprise Rideshare, and I also want to say Enterprise Rideshare also has a partnership with Coast Transit. And they have a partnership with FDOT. I'm sure you guys know about this, and they serve economic and stress regions throughout Florida, and also serve 28 of Florida's 32 rural counties. Tammy Quinn has a question. Should I wait for later for that?
Yeah, we're running behind.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll finish up. So I'll go to the next slide. I think I only have 1 or 2 slides. You know, in what we did, we surveyed, program administrators across these different low-income car ownership programs and transit programs and Vanpool programs, and then also look to, we want to know the policy challenges that they have. They need multi-year public funding. Oftentimes when you compare the metrics, the ridership metrics that they have compared to urban programs, urban transit programs, it may seem like, they move, rather slow. But when you look at the impact that they have amongst those who use them, that's where you see the value there. They also, these program administrators talk about wanting greater flexibility to serve their clients. Their policies that incentive, when we go to lower income car ownership programs or car donation programs, policies that incentivize car donation. The 2017 tax bill, raised the threshold for people to get tax credits for the donations they make for cars. And, because that threshold was raised, now more people, they're not going to get tax credit for cars that they donate, which leads to less cars that these programs are able to donate. Another thing when it comes to car ownership programs that they mentioned was SNAP assets are a concern, where families could ultimately have to choose between getting SNAP benefits and getting a reliable car. In some states, depending on the level that they set for their asset limits, rural Vanpool programs could benefit from state or local transit benefit ordinances, which can allow people to understand how these ordinances work, and also further market Vanpool programs to help them expand. And then rural areas present spatial challenges that ride-hailing companies like Uber and Lyft, they haven't been able to solve. Next slide. Just want to end with some positive notes. I want to be all doom and gloom as far as the challenges that some of these programs have. But low-income car ownership programs, they can create transformative outcomes. They can they've raised credit scores for a number of those that have used their programs. They can provide workforce development partnerships with local governments to help more TANF recipients get off the rolls and be, financially, successful on their own. And they provide options to, predatory auto lending practices. Rural transit programs, they have several positive spillover effects where, they're sustainable. The ones that we interview show that, they can be sustainable in these proper mixes where you have concentrated employment and job training, you have, low income housing, a reliable transit provider, and ridership potential that can expand to more than just, the low income riders that use it, but it can expand to just the everyday general ridership, throughout the central and peripheral areas. And, with people having greater access to jobs, that means they have more earnings, they have more spending, more local spending, which ultimately leads to greater tax revenue in local areas, local governments. Next slide. And then next moves, transit agency planning efforts, we hope that, from what we put out and what others are advocating as well, that they blend more community member input with the technical analysis they do. That way they can, it can be, future transit programs can be more accessible to all riders. Future car ownership programs need more diversified funding to survive and thrive. It's oftentimes the volatility that's there when the state funding that comes, particularly in this type of time that we're in now. It could hurt, it could hurt the way that they work and the mission that they have. If they have more private funding, that can certainly make them, more sustainable and able to weather, the storms and ups and downs that come with government funding. And then future research, we hope, can explore this intersectionality between recent tax policy, aging infrastructure, which also drives down, can drive up costs for those who accept car donations because these are cars that have more wear and tear. And then, we also think about, ways in which rural transit programs can complement car ownership programs and meeting rural demands. We believe that, while they may have, some competing interests, they can ultimately have, reach the same goals and same positive outcomes. And I'll leave it at that. I know I've gone over time, but tried to make sure I got through everything, but I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Ray. All right, so we have 5 minutes left and one presentation, so 2 different things. Number 1, if you have a question, put it in the chat. we're not going to get to you. Love you. Really sorry. All your people really like to talk. Number two, this is recorded, so we will send this out. And number three is because we only have 5 minutes, if you have to hop off, totally understandable. We thank you so much. I know Tracy and Darlene will have some things that they want to go through, and I know they'll do it quickly, but still. And if you can stay on, fantastic. We love you. And without further ado, Tracy and Darlene.
Hi, everybody. This is Darlene. We are in North Bethesda, Maryland, which is in Montgomery County. We're one of 6 TMDs, and we work under the umbrella with commuter services of the Department of Transportation. So can you go ahead and advance, please? Keep going. Thank you. I'm going to go through this very quickly. We're supposed to be talking about the federal agencies, and as you can see, we have quite a few in North Bethesda. We have around 10,000 employees in Montgomery County, in North Bethesda, and we work with every single one of them. I'm not going to go into the TMD law or the TDM laws. We don't have time, so keep going. Advance, please. Okay. You'll see Michelle there on the bottom left. We first started doing our Vanpool formations with Marriott International. They've got 3,000 employees there. And we worked with both Enterprise and VRI. We now know they're one and the same. Keep going. So along with yeah, you can keep going to the next one, please. Along with promoting our carpool matching, our Ride On, which is a local bus service in Montgomery County, Metro Rail, Metro Bus, we started with a real surge with promoting Vanpools to our federal agencies. We worked with our ETCs to schedule meetings with them one-on-one. We did some zip code searches to see where the bulk of the employees live, how they're traveling to the county, and we also invited reps from the federal agency's transit benefits programs to be at these formation meetings because everyone is just a little bit different. And in addition to having our Vanpool reps there, we had reps from the Vanpool Alliance, the Council of Governments, or COG, for their pool rewards program, Frederick County for their VIP program. Sorry, I'm trying to go through this so fast. And then for Montgomery County, we have a Fair Share program, which is a subsidy. It's like a seed program where employers can offer any amount up to the maximum of the $270 a month. The county will contribute 80% of what the employee, the county will contribute 80% of the employee per month, where the employer contributes at least $25 a month per employee. For example, if the employer offers $125 a month per employee, Montgomery County will pay $100 or 80%, and the employers pay $25 a month per employee, which caps out at $40,000 a year. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy. She's going to talk about Vanpool marketing. Sorry, I went so quickly, but we're running out of time.
Good afternoon. We'll have to have you guys back for our second one because you guys have a lot of them.
We do. I'll make this quick though. We basically use multiple tools to market vanpooling to our employers and our employees. We hold what we call CIDs, which is, I'm sure everybody does, the type of thing where you set up a table in a lobby or a lunchroom and provide information. And we also participate in relocation and benefits fairs. And in some of those fairs, we'll hold Vanpool meetings as breakout sessions. We usually create flyers to promote the meetings. There's an example of one of them on the slide. And we'll send them out to the ETCs, who in turn will blast them out to their employers, to their employees. And that's a great way to get the word out as well, because if an employee can't make the meeting, they can just email us and we'll get them the information. We've done at Marriott International Headquarters what they call desk drops, and it's where we provide the flyer, they print it out, and their night staff leaves the flyer on every employee's desk at night. So when the employee arrives the next morning, they see the flyer promoting an upcoming Vanpool meeting. And we've done a lot of those, and those work out really well. And we also have the ETCs put the flyers in their lobbies and on their electronic screens around the work sites. And we use a lot of those screens in our federal agencies, but some private employers have them as well. Next slide, please. We host Vanpool formation meetings to provide information about Vanpooling. And depending upon the employer, we'll hold multiple meetings. And we base them on zip codes. So when we hold multiple meetings in one day, we'll bring the Vanpoolers together who live in one zip code for, a half hour, 45 minutes, another zip code the next half hour, and so on. If we only have a few people in one zip code, we'll bring people together from different zip codes that are in close proximity to each other. As people arrive for the meeting, we have them complete what we call a Vanpool information form, where we ask them for contact information, their home address, work hours, and we also ask them how they currently get to work. Are their hours flexible at all? And if they know if there's any park and ride lots close to them. If they don't know of a park and ride lot near their home, we'll definitely help them find one. And we also invite the Vanpool provider to give a presentation, and they include vehicle choice, cost estimates for each zip code, all that kind of good stuff. Then we as NBTC staff discuss transit benefits, ride matching, and next steps. And these are really a great way for the Vanpoolers to meet people that they could be riding with. And we formed the Vanpools right on the spot there at some of our meetings, so they've worked out well. Next slide, please. So after the Vanpool meeting, Darlene usually takes the completed forms and she'll run the match list for each person that filled out a form to find other people that would be a good fit for the Vanpool. Then we send out an invite to everyone to participate in a conference call. And during that conference call, the logistics are decided. We invite the Vanpool provider to participate. So if there's any questions, they can answer that. They decide where to meet, the arrival and departure times, vehicle choice, the Vanpool coordinator, and the drivers. And once all of the logistics are decided, we set a date for the van to start. And that usually depends upon what transit benefits the folks are receiving and their first payment for the benefit. But we offer to help people if and point them in the right direction if they are not signed up for transit benefits and they are eligible. So once everything is signed and sealed with transit benefits and with the Vanpool provider, the van is delivered, and we at NBTC are there to welcome the Vanpoolers along with the provider. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of follow-up. We check in with our Vanpools at least once a quarter to make sure that everything is going smoothly. If they lose riders, they know they can always contact us, and we can run new match lists and try to help them find new riders. Next slide. And these are just, I know it's a lot on this slide, but these are just a few testimonials from Vanpoolers we've worked with in the past and that we presently work with. We've worked with people who have used 3 different modes to get to work, and Vanpooling has just been amazing for them. It's been a lifesaver, and it's totally improved their quality of life. And I think that's our last slide. I think that's it for us.
You guys are amazing. Also, I feel like that was a blast from the past with Michelle in a lot of photos. So thanks.
We love those photos.
Thank you for all of our presenters. I know it's just a couple of minutes, it's 1:33. So any questions that you guys have, please put them in the chat. We will circle back with all of them and get some information sent out. Thank you for everything. You guys were amazing. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week, if you guys even know what day it is. Anything else? Amanda or David, you want to say something, or Paul?
No, I'll just, again, thank everyone. And, during these kind of crazy times, rely on your network of peers and colleagues throughout the chapter and the rest of the association. And, make sure to join us as well. We've got virtual discussions we're now going to be holding every Friday afternoon. You should have received information on that, I think yesterday or the day before, but you can register online for those. It's kind of first come, first serve. We have capacity for 100 people to talk at one time. So look forward to enjoying it. And if there's anything we can help with, just reach out.